When I inherited my grandfather's cabin, I thought I'd found sanctuary. Nestled deep in the pines, miles from the suffocating rules of suburban life, the old log structure represented freedom. No neighbors peeking over fences, no lawn inspectors measuring grass height. Just me, my two German shepherds, Ranger and Shadow, and the crisp breath of untouched wilderness. But freedom, I soon discovered, is a concept some people refuse to comprehend. Karen Foster was one of them. Whispering Pines was a gated community half a mile from my land, a manicured enclave where homeowners association rules were treated like constitutional law. Karen wasn't just the HOA president. She was its self-appointed enforcer, judge, and executioner. Her word was gospel, her clipboard, a symbol of unchecked power. The problem? My cabin wasn't in Whispering Pines. Not by a long shot. Yet, that didn't stop Karen from acting as though my land was an extension of her dominion. To her, my rugged log cabin, with its stacked firewood and wildflower patches, was an eyesore, tarnishing the HOA's pristine image. It started with letters. Cream-colored envelopes with embossed HOA seals appeared tucked under my windshield, politely informing me that my cabin's exterior violated community visual guidelines. Next came the fines, absurd notices taped brazenly to my door. $500 for non-compliant landscaping, $750 for unauthorized structure repairs. I laughed at first. Surely, Karen would realize her mistake when her letters went unanswered. But Karen Foster was not wired to accept silence. Ignoring her was like waving a red flag at a bull. One morning, while repairing the old tool shed with Ranger loyally at my feet, I saw her standing at the tree line. Arms crossed, chin raised, sunglasses perched in that way power-hungry people wear them when they believe their authority is absolute. She wasn't alone. Her clipboard accompanied her, as always. "Mr. Callahan," she called, voice sharp enough to cut steel. "Your noncompliance has been noted for weeks. This property is subject to Whispering Pines community aesthetics policy. You cannot simply opt out." I set down my hammer, wiping sweat from my brow. "Karen, you're standing on my land. This cabin's been here longer than Whispering Pines has had paved roads. Your HOA has no say here." Her lips tightened, a thin smile masking her growing frustration. Neighborhood cohesion doesn't stop at paperwork lines. We must maintain standards, even at the fringes. Ranger, sensing the tension, rose to his feet, his gaze fixed on Karen. Shadow appeared from behind the shed, tail stiff, ears forward. They weren't growling yet, but their message was clear. This was their domain. Karen took a cautious step back, but recovered quickly. "I'll be reporting this to the HOA board. If you refuse to cooperate, we'll escalate through proper channels." I couldn't help but grin. "Karen, the only proper channel here is the creek that runs behind the cabin. You're welcome to try explaining jurisdiction to it." Her face flushed crimson. She spun on her heels, retreating to her pristine SUV, tires crunching angrily over gravel as she sped off. But I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't driven by logic or legal boundaries. She was driven by the need to control, to impose order as she saw fit. To her, my cabin was a defiant blot on a canvas she had painted white, and she intended to scrub it clean. Over the next few days, the battle escalated. Karen reported me to the county zoning office, claiming illegal construction. The inspector who showed up nearly laughed himself off my porch when he realized the construction was me reshingling a birdhouse. Then came the maintenance crews, 2 HOA trucks blocking my private access road under the guise of emergency tree trimming. That stunt lasted until Sheriff Decker personally escorted them off my property. But Karen wasn't finished. I could feel it in the air. Each of her failures only fueled her obsession. I knew a storm was coming. And when Karen Foster felt ignored, she didn't file complaints. She took matters into her own hands. The days after Karen's roadside blockade stunt were deceptively quiet. No neon fines, no clipboard ambushes, not even a drive-by glare from her gleaming SUV. For most people, that would signal surrender. But with Karen Foster, silence wasn't retreat, it was recalibration. I stayed vigilant. Ranger and Shadow sensed it too. They'd patrol the perimeter more often, their movements sharper, their instincts tuned like taut wires. My land was calm, but the air was thick with the promise of disruption. It came on a crisp Monday morning. I had driven into town for supplies, nothing urgent, just a routine run for lumber and a new water filter. The dogs remained behind, as always. They were more than pets. They were guardians, trained by my grandfather to respect the land and defend it when needed. Miller's Hardware was bustling, a usual stop where small-town conversations often outlasted the shopping list. I was mid-chat with Old Man Miller about reinforcing storm shutters when my phone vibrated in my back pocket. A notification from the cabin's motion sensor cameras. I pulled out my phone, casually at first. Then I saw the live feed. Karen was inside my cabin. My stomach tightened. She'd shattered the side window, shards glittering on the hardwood floor, and was now waltzing through the living room like a real estate agent giving a grand tour. Except, instead of potential buyers, she had an audience of online followers. Her phone was live streaming, her voice dripping with smug entitlement. This is the kind of hazardous structure that drags down property values. As HOA president, I have the authority to document and address such issues directly, she said, panning the camera across my grandfather's antique rifle rack like it was contraband. Ranger's silhouette appeared in the hallway. Karen didn't notice. She was too busy narrating her fantasy coup. Shadow emerged next, a ghost of black fur weaving silently through the edge of the frame. They weren't attacking, they were assessing. Two disciplined guardians waiting for the right moment. My grip on the phone tightened, a grin involuntarily creeping across my face. Karen turned mid-sentence and froze. Ranger stood in the center of the room, his ears erect, tail stiff, posture rigid with authority. Shadow flanked the doorway, her amber eyes gleaming, blocking the only escape route. Karen's confidence faltered, but she covered it with forced bravado. "Oh, look at you. Good boys. Sit. Sit." But my dogs weren't performing for likes and comments. Ranger's low growl resonated through the cabin, a guttural warning that made even I feel the tension through the screen. Shadow advanced, her steps measured, her presence overwhelming. Karen stumbled backward, the fake smile collapsing into wide-eyed panic. Her foot caught the edge of the coffee table, sending her sprawling onto the floor, arms flailing as her phone skidded across the wood, still live-streaming her descent. "This is private property. Heel." "Stop this at once," she barked, but her voice lacked command. Ranger responded with a sharp bark, short, authoritative, a command for her to stay put. I could barely contain my laughter. Karen had orchestrated this intrusion thinking she could control the narrative. But now, pinned between two sentinels of fur and muscle, the power dynamic had flipped completely. My dogs weren't attacking, they didn't need to. Their dominance was psychological, their discipline absolute. As Karen sat trembling on the floor, clutching her clipboard like a useless shield, I tapped Sheriff Decker's contact on my phone. He answered on the first ring. "Decker here. Sheriff, HOA Karen just broke into my cabin. She's currently detained by Ranger and Shadow. You might want to come witness the HOA's finest in action." There was a pause, then a familiar chuckle. "On my way." I watched as Karen attempted to stand, only to freeze when Shadow's low growl reverberated inches from her face. She wasn't going anywhere. The camera's live feed was still rolling, her humiliation broadcasted in real time to her loyal followers, many of whom had begun flooding the chat with laughing emojis and shocked comments. The HOA's Iron Lady was now a meme in the making. But this wasn't about social media. This was about lines crossed. Karen had mistaken silence for weakness. She thought paperwork could override property rights. Now, pinned to my cabin floor under the silent watch of two German shepherds, reality was teaching her a lesson. As I sped back toward the cabin, I knew this was far from over. Karen's crusade had reached its peak. Now came the fall. By the time I turned onto the gravel road leading to the cabin, the flashing blue and red lights of Sheriff Decker's cruiser were already casting their glow against the pines. He stood leaning casually against his vehicle, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with a look that blended amusement and disbelief. Karen Foster sat on the porch steps, hugging her clipboard to her chest like it was a lifeline. Her designer blouse was streaked with dust, her sunglasses askew, and her expression, once so meticulously composed, had crumbled into a cocktail of panic and indignation. Ranger sat beside her, an unblinking sentinel. Shadow paced the porch edge, her presence a silent reminder that Karen was going nowhere. "Afternoon, Callahan," Decker greeted as I pulled up. "Heard you had an unexpected guest." I stepped out, nodding towards Karen. She let herself in. My dogs extended a custom welcome. Karen shot to her feet, or tried to. Shadow's sharp, deliberate step forward made her freeze mid-motion. "Sheriff, this man's dogs attacked me in my own community. He's harboring dangerous animals. This is an HOA matter." Decker's eyebrow arched. "Karen, you broke into his cabin. Smashed a window. Trespassed. That's not an HOA infraction. That's a felony." Her mouth opened, but no words followed. The clipboard trembled in her grip. "And," Decker continued, pulling out his phone, "since you were kind enough to Livestream your break-in, we've got ourselves some pretty airtight evidence." Karen's eyes widened as Decker tapped play. Her own voice echoed back at her. "As HOA president, I have the authority." "Stop." Her voice cracked. "You're twisting this." "I was conducting a community safety check." Decker chuckled, slipping his phone back into his pocket.
"Right.
"A safety check where you break windows and trespass on private property. Solid defense." I kept my tone calm, but firm. "Karen, you crossed a line. You thought rules gave you power. But this is my land. Not your gated fantasy." Her hands balled into fists. "You don't understand. People like you think you can just hide from order. Communities need standards. Without them, everything falls apart." Decker sighed, pulling out a citation pad. "Karen, you're being charged with criminal trespass, vandalism, and unlawful entry. You'll get your day in court, but right now, you're leaving this property with me." Karen's composure snapped. "This isn't over, Callahan. You think a sheriff's report will stop me? The HOA backs me. The board supports." A shrill notification sound cut her off. She glanced at her phone. Her live stream, still rolling, was flooded with comments. But they weren't supporting her. They were laughing, screenshotting, sharing clips of her flailing on the cabin floor while Ranger stood guard. Her audience had turned. Decker's tone softened, but his words didn't. "Karen, you built your authority on fear and paperwork. But out here, respect is earned, not demanded." I whistled softly, signaling Ranger and Shadow. Instantly, their postures relaxed. Ranger trotted to my side, Shadow following with a quiet grace that made Karen flinch. Decker gestured to his cruiser. "Let's go." Karen hesitated, but the weight of reality pressed her forward. As she passed me, her glare still carried that flicker of defiance, but it was hollow now, a queen without her crown. As Decker drove off, dust swirling in the wake of the patrol car, I stood on the porch, the dogs at my side. The cabin's broken window would be an easy fix. Karen's broken reputation? Not so much. The live stream was already going viral. By the time Karen stepped into her next HOA board meeting, she wouldn't be the iron-fisted enforcer. She'd be the woman who got outmaneuvered by 2 dogs and her own arrogance. I glanced down at Ranger and Shadow, scratching behind their ears. "Good work, team." But in the pit of my gut, I knew Karen wouldn't retreat quietly. People like her never accepted defeat. They plotted comebacks. Her authority had cracked. Now, it was only a matter of how far she'd fall. And when the fall came, I'd be ready. Karen Foster didn't go quietly. 2 days after the sheriff hauled her off my land, she called an emergency HOA board meeting. Word spread fast. Residents of Whispering Pines filled the clubhouse, buzzing with curiosity. Some came for answers. Most came for the show. I wasn't part of their HOA. But I didn't need to be. Karen had turned my cabin into a community spectacle, and today, the consequences were hers to bear. Through a friend who lived in the community, I got a live feed of the meeting. Karen stood at the podium, poised in her power suit, but the once commanding presence was now a brittle facade. She gripped the lectern like it was the only thing keeping her afloat. "This community is under siege," she began, her voice sharp but lacking the confidence of before. "We have individuals, outsiders, undermining our standards. If we allow this to continue, Whispering Pines will descend into chaos." Murmurs rippled through the room. The board members exchanged glances. Some sympathetic, most wary. Then the live stream chat exploded. A resident had pulled up Karen's infamous cabin break-in video on the clubhouse projector. The room dimmed as Karen's voice echoed through the speakers. "As HOA president, I have the authority." There she was, larger than life, stumbling over furniture as my dogs closed in, her once mighty clipboard flailing helplessly. Laughter erupted, not cruel, but liberating. Karen's reign had been long, her grip suffocating. Today, the HOA saw her not as their protector, but as a tyrant unraveling. One board member, Mr. Lansing, cleared his throat. "Karen, the HOA's authority ends at Whispering Pines property lines. You've violated state trespassing laws. This isn't enforceable policy, it's personal vendetta." Karen's composure fractured. "You don't understand. If we don't set boundaries, people like him will erode our community." "You mean people who aren't even in this HOA?" Lansing countered. "Or people who refuse to be bullied?" A wave of applause silenced her. I leaned back, watching through the feed, Ranger and Shadow lounging at my feet. The so-called HOA queen was losing her court, one loyalist at a time. Her final blow came not from me, not from the sheriff, but from within. Marjorie Bell, a longtime resident and one of Karen's earliest supporters, stood up. "Karen, I've lived here 20 years. You fined my granddaughter for chalk art on our driveway. You ticketed my son's pickup for being visually disruptive. We followed you out of fear. But not anymore." The room erupted. Residents, many of whom had stayed silent under Karen's rule, spoke up, one after another, recounting stories of petty fines, invasive inspections, and Karen's insatiable hunger for control. Her power wasn't dissolving, it was disintegrating. The board took a vote. Unanimous. Karen Foster was removed as HOA president. Her clipboard, once a symbol of her dominion, was left abandoned on the lectern as she walked out, head down, shoulders hunched. The exodus of whispers followed her to the door. Justice didn't always need courtroom drama or public arrests. Sometimes, the weight of collective disdain was enough to topple an empire. Later that week, I was splitting firewood by the cabin when Sheriff Decker pulled up. He leaned out of his cruiser, a knowing grin on his face. "Karen's resigned. The HOA board's cleaning house. Thought you'd want to hear it from me." I smiled, tossing a log onto the pile. Figured that storm would pass eventually. He chuckled. "Oh, and her live stream? It's making the rounds. Karen versus the Cabin Guardians, someone even made t-shirts." I glanced at Ranger and Shadow. They didn't care for internet fame. For them, it was simple. Home is home, and you defend it. "You ever think of running for HOA president?" Decker joked. "Not a chance. I prefer the real wilderness to man-made ones." He tipped his hat and drove off. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the tree-line, I sat on the porch with my dogs, listening to the hum of the forest. Karen's war had ended, not with a dramatic legal showdown, but with her own collapse, brought on by arrogance, overreach, and a pair of dogs who knew exactly how to hold their ground. The cabin remained, untamed, unapologetic, and free. As for Karen Foster, the HOA queen had finally learned a truth she couldn't fine or file away. Some territories will never bow to self-appointed rulers. End of section 4. This wraps up the revenge arc with a satisfying collapse of Karen's power and leaves a lingering sense of victory for the viewer.